going to talk about change and share her generational insights, hoping to open your eyes to opportunities and reimagine how we can all work together to create a more innovative, equitable world, because the future is now. Ladies, we're bringing her back. Speaker, author, and EWI lover, Karen McCullough.
Yes, I'm back. Wow, what I got out of this morning. You know, I speak at a lot of associations, and you all should write the book on growth, on inspiration. I was so touched because so many associations are struggling right now, and your enthusiasm, I mean, you should be so honored to be a part of this, and then take what you're learning here back with you and continue to grow it. Give yourselves a hand. Hang on one second. I always have clicker trouble. Clicker. There we go. Okay, so, you know, I love to take you back, so I have to take you back to when American Idol was good. Remember Paula? It was fun, wasn't it, back then? Yeah, those were the days. I remember a guy named Sanjaya. Who remembers Sanjaya out here? Okay, so I'm taking you all back right now to I think it was 2006, 2007. And I was watching the show and I noticed he was horrible. But his parents thought he was great. And he would come off and they'd go, you were wonderful, you were wonderful. And I thought, are we hearing the same music, right? And then everybody was voting on their flip phone. You remember all of that? Yeah, it was interesting for me because what I noticed back then was I needed to start speaking on these Gen Ys back then. Oh, here we go. Because the world was changing. The world was changing because we had a new generation coming on the scene. And back then we called you millennials Gen Y. These are the people that are now in their 30s, and I'll get to you in a little bit, you 30-year-olds, because we don't really know what you are. What are you, right? But back then, I did say this, before I became the millennial evangelist, I did say that Gen Y was the first generation whose self-esteem was higher than their talent. I don't say that anymore, millennials, because you hire me now. And then you graduated, the 30-year-olds graduated from school, and there were no jobs. There were no jobs out there, so they went back to school. They say that you're the most educated of all the generations, and yesterday I talked about the disruptions. They happened because of, now we call you millennials. So what I want you to think of this morning as I'm talking about this is this thing called the millennial mindset. Because we all need to have it, because we're not going back. We're not going back. And if you want to grow and inspire, which is what you were talking about here, we all have to realize that this is a forward-looking thing that we are going towards in order to have growth in our companies and in our associations. Because the millennials, young people, brought about these disruptions, and there are going to be more coming. So back then it was like, oh my gosh, the millennials are here, right? We were afraid of you then, yeah. Oh, this is going to be tough. So they did call me the millennial evangelist. And in the beginning, we had up there were the traditionalists, and they were really angry, right? They were angry, and we'll get into them in a little bit. And then the baby boomers came on the scene. They're the ones in the middle there. And baby boomers, you've had to change the most. In the beginning, you couldn't wait for young people to be just like you because you changed. Remember hippies? And I could tell there were a couple hippies in this room. I've been looking at you all. And I could tell that some of the hippies are still here. But hippies, you changed, right? And then we have a Gen X, and we don't really know about you. You just continually say whatever. And now we've got a new generation on the scene, Generation Z. And Generation Z, I don't think there's a Gen Z in the room. These are people that just turned 20. Is there one in the room? How many of you have one at home? Yeah, so you'll be learning a lot about them also. So the first thing I want to ask you is a true or false question. Millennials were the first generation that we call the me generation. Is that true or false? How many say false? How many say true? Well, guess what? It wasn't. It was back in the day. When the baby boomer came on the scene, Gen X wrote all of these articles calling them like the most absurd generation. They were the wildcatters. And then Gen X came on the scene, and we didn't care about you, Gen X, one little bit. In fact, remember you were called the latchkey kids? Yeah. And so every year, every decade, when a new generation comes on the scene, the generations before them kind of are upset, which is what millennials are going through right now, because I'm hearing millennials talk a little bit about the Gen Zs that are out there. So it's not been nothing new. So this is what we look at. These are the dates. I'm not big on dates. I'm not big on dates because I'm a baby boomer and I think like a millennial. And I have the attitude of a Gen Xer, right? Whatever, right? And so you've got to begin to look at yourself and you've got to begin to see where do you fit in the spectrum. They say if you're the baby of the family, the youngest, and we have any babies in here? You're usually the generation below you. You're going to go younger rather than going up. And if you're the oldest in the family, you're going to be more towards the generation before you. And I don't know why that is, but the studies are just showing that. So to me, it isn't really about your age. It's about your experiences. It's how you feel about technology. It's how you feel about the disruptions that are going on. So for many baby boomers in this room, you probably already have the millennial mindset. But traditionalists are 1922 to 1945. There are 27 million today. Baby boomers, 46 to 64, 70 million. There were 88 million. And the reason I want you to think about the 88 million and millennials, you were 82 million. We cut your dates back to give some to Gen Z. We've got 80 millions. When we see numbers like 80 million, it doesn't always affect just the workplace. It affects the marketplace. It affects the buying powers. The baby boomers, you brought in the SUVs. You changed the way we drive cars, and you brought in the bigger cars, and you bought the bigger homes, and you bought the gated communities. And we start to learn that when we have numbers this big, the reason that we talk about you so much is because you affect the economy. And so right now we've got two of the largest generations, the millennials and the baby boomers, still in between poor Gen X. Gen X, you are really sandwiched in between two of the most self-absorbed generations there are. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so 70 million baby boomers out there, right? 66 million of you Gen X, 1965 to 1980. Remember, the dates can vary. Millennials, 1981 to 1997. We used to have you go to 2001, but we cut back a few and we gave them to Gen Z. So let's get into it. Are you ready? Yeah. The reason I like this so much is because people talk a lot about biases. That's really where we are today. And there's an age bias out there. Every single person in this room feels at one time or another like their age, right, got them, or people were not speaking to them, that there's a bias. So we all have the same feeling, whatever your generation. The last time I spoke, a guy from Gen X said that he had just seen an article in Forbes, and he said they totally forgot about us. They listed all the generations and they left us off. And Gen X feels like the most really disrespected of all the generations that are out there. But baby boomers, you feel bad about it too, don't you? And how about you millennials? We've heard enough bad things about you. So every generation out there feels this bias. So let's just kind of leave those biases today in this room. Well, I don't know if I'm speaking in here again, but leave them here anyway and when you walk out the door, because really we want to soften all of that. So I love to start with this one because it's just so easy. Remember the yeah. So we're talking about traditionalists, 1922 to 1945. And why am I bringing them up? I'm bringing them up because this is a generation that took us out of World War II and made us a world power. I'll say it again. They brought us out of World War II and they made us a world power. If you've read the book Unbroken, it is a fabulous book. You'll realize that we went into World War II. We didn't even have planes that could fly properly, and we came out of world power because of this generation who taught us about sacrifice. We probably don't have any traditionalists in this room because they're in their mid-70s right now, but I bet these are your parents and grandparents. And I need for you to tell your kids to pick up the phone and call, or better yet, go over and visit. Now, my sister's a traditionalist, and she's on Facebook, but she's a stalker. She never puts anything out there, but she knows what every grandchild is doing. And the other day we were talking, I was visiting, and she said, none of my grandkids, they never call me. And I said, nobody calls anybody anymore. I said, text them. And she said, well, they're in school. And I said, text them. And they answered her. And she was shocked. And it really was an interesting thing because what I noticed was that we will look at the world through our lens. And her lens was you would never, ever even take a phone into the classroom because she is a traditionalist. And what we've got to begin to understand is that many of you are still looking at the world through the lens of when you grew up, when you had your first job. And things have changed. And so you need to hang around with young people more and find out what they're doing because this is really where it's going. And the reason I talk about traditions in every talk is because when we came out of World War II and corporate America decided how are we going to run our companies, they looked at the military. The military took us out of World War II and they made us a world power because they did it right. And so every business that the baby boomer fell into was run by the military, and it was called top-down management, top-down leadership, and it lasted for almost 30 years. And so as we are seeing changes happen right now, we are seeing evolution and change that really, the way we ran organizations and companies was the same for 30, 40 years. And so the reason change is so hard right now for so many is because those are decades. Those are decades of work. But I've got to leave the traditionalists right now. We were there for just a second, because guess who's on the scene? Oh yeah, look at right off the bat. Yeah, okay. Boomers, you can do this, right? Yeah, baby boomers, they can't get no satisfaction. They're still saying that. Actually, I just saw the Rolling Stones. They look pretty good. Jagger actually was in the hospital, but he's 76, and he's still kicking it, man. So he's a traditionalist, right? But he is really known by baby boomers. So baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. Think about it. Men came back from World War II, and what happened? Boom! Babies. That's why they call it baby boomers. You know, why do they call it baby boomers? Well, because there were a lot of them that came back. We weren't ready for you all. So the older boomers, like these are the geezer boomers, come on. The older boomers, they are the ones who really set the pace with rock and roll. It was goodbye Elvis, hello Beatles, and it began a whole new thing. We had the Rolling Stones. The music changed, and so did the attitude. So we had a generation of a lot of people, and they were rebels back then. We called them hippies. Does anybody know a hippie? Does anybody remember hippies? Is anybody here from Oregon? From Portland? They all went up there. Yeah, there's a couple in Galveston, I think. I'm not quite sure, but yeah. So think about this. Back then, it was anti-war, make love, not war, and we had the hippie, long hair, Birkenstocks, tie-dye, right? But here's what I think. I think the hippie was in college and he was looking over, and his best friend was in a business major reading the Wall Street Journal. And the hippie saw where stockbrokers make millions. He cut off his hair, took off his earring, and he became a Republican. Right, Houston? Where are you? Right? There's a lot of, right. That's what happens. The baby boomer changed. The baby boomer changed, and so when the millennial came on the scene, they were sure that the millennial would change. They couldn't wait for the millennial to grow up. And they still haven't. No, just quit kidding, millennials, they haven't. So what have we got here? We've got highly adaptive, highly optimistic, highly determined generation, because there were so many, very competitive. And they took this competitive spirit with them and they took it into the workplace. And baby boomers like to work. And you know what's interesting? They like to tell everyone how much they work. They like to talk about how much they work. Now they're talking to a Gen X who's going, you don't need to work that hard, and don't talk to me. Gen X does not want to hear it, right? So baby boomers, when you want to complain about work, the only people you can tell is another baby boomer. You got to call the baby boomer. I work so hard, yes, so do I. Because nobody else really cares. I can make fun because I am a baby boomer. But baby boomers were raised in a totally different time than it is right now. If a baby boomer cried, out in public even, picture a little baby boomer crying out at the Walmart. The dad would say, cry in front of everyone, I'll give you something to cry about. Today, if that happened, there would be someone like taking a picture, I'm calling CBS, we are reporting right now. You'd be on the front page of the paper, you'd be in jail. The world has changed. The world has changed so much. Discipline has changed. How we raise kids have changed. And so for many of us, I am a grandma, nobody listens to me. Now the kids are turning 7 and 8. Guess who they're calling? Me. Because they messed up for 7 years and I have to help clean up the act. No, I'm just kidding. But really, a lot of younger people are not really going to their parents for advice. They have their own friends, they have their community and their groups, but they will come back eventually to us because I think in some ways everything changes, but some things still remain the same. So we've got baby boomers out there, and right now, baby boomers are retiring, and they're retiring, and they're leaving behind a lot of the experiences that they had, right? Because baby boomers are hardworking, they have lots of experiences, very motivated, they love motivational speakers. Gen X, not at all, not so much. Relationships, they say that baby boomers are the best at relationships. They can connect, they can network, they can talk. They can talk and they can talk and they can talk. Baby boomers, you're known as being the big talkers, right? And high emotional intelligence, we talked about that yesterday, and they live through hard times and they can share those. So they've got so many experiences that they can share. And the problem is right now that we're having a transfer of information and knowledge because when they retire, when they leave, they're taking with them all of that experience. So we've got to begin to have opportunities where the baby boomer can share best practices. And I was speaking at a company called Prudential Insurance in Newark, and it was really interesting because they had, they did a skit, and it was kind of like a podcast, and they had the guy with the little hat on, like, this is a podcast. And then they had 4 microphones, and each microphone had a generation. And the baby boomer's microphone, the baby boomer talked about what it was like when she took her first job. And it was so interesting compared to what it was like when the millennial had their first job. And so what we want to begin to do, especially in EWI, is to begin to share those stories of what it was like and where it is today so we can begin to see the growth and the changes and we can begin to respect each other. So with that in mind, I'm going to share a story with you kind of quickly because I recently spoke with Airbnb and I heard this story and I said, can I take it and share it? They said yes. A guy named Brian Chesky started Airbnb when he was 26 years old. I don't know if any of you have read the Airbnb story, but he was living in an apartment in San Francisco with a roommate. And at the time, Google was having a conference in San Francisco, and every room in the hotel in the city was booked. There were no hotel rooms for anyone. And Chesky got this great idea, and he had his roommate kind of go along with him, and they went over to an academy or somewhere like that, and they bought 3 air mattresses. And they blew them up and they put them in their 1-bedroom apartment in the living room and they rented them out to people going to the Google conference. 2 guys and a woman, did not know each other, rented the air mattress because there was no place to stay. And this was the birth of Airbnb. He got this brilliant idea. He charged $150 an air mattress. He made a couple $100 that night. He goes, I've got an idea. And that's how Airbnb started with a guy named Brian Chesky. And it was really for the very first 5 or 6 years, it was just a place to get a cheap room or a cheap place to stay. And then he got this idea. He got this idea that he wanted to make it an experience. He wanted to make Airbnb, he wanted to elevate it from just a cheap place to stay to going to the Bronx and staying with a family, eating with people in the Bronx, going to the Bronx gardens. He had this vision, he had no way to create it. And there was this guy named Chip Conley, and he was 54 at the time, 56, I can't remember, but Chip was the master of boutique hotels. And he would take these little dives and turn them into these amazing hotels. And Chesky said, I gotta get this Chip guy over here. So he invites Chip over, Chip Conley, he invites him over to encourage him to join Airbnb and to elevate it. Chip says that he's sitting there with 3 guys who have hoodies on. And they're on their phones the entire time, not even making eye contact with him, talking about stuff he had no idea what it was all about because they were all into technology. And he said, I'm in the wrong place. I got to get out of here. And he said he felt so insecure. He said he even felt stupid. Like, how could I work with these 3 young guys? Forgetting all of the accomplishments that he had done. And he said he was almost ready to walk out and say, no, I cannot do this deal with you. And then he thought about something. He said, you know what? I have wise eyes. I can teach them a lot. I have a lot of experiences. They have fresh eyes. They can teach me. And he stayed. And he stayed and he grew Airbnb to what it is today. And if you go to Airbnb in Europe, you can stay in amazing villas. I mean, it is just unbelievable. I have a few nodding back there because it's now become an experience. But it wouldn't have happened if they didn't bring in an old guy like Chip, who's now in his 60s. And he talks about this story because he says we are missing so many opportunities if we dismiss each other because we're too old or we're too young. So it's the combination in this chapter, I can feel it in this EWI group. You have old eyes, wise eyes. I've got the old wise eyes, and you've got fresh eyes. And it's the combination of the two that will continually grow it. So I thought I would share that with you, younger people. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to think in terms of people as people. We've got to get curious about each other. We've got to begin to ask more questions about each other. We've got to be open to listening, which is what I'll be talking about later. We have to be listening to new perspectives instead of saying, that will never work. Oh, I get it. We've already done that. We've got to be open to listening to new ideas. I just worked with all CEOs last week in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and they said their biggest challenge is they always were the solution. People came to them for the answers, and they always gave the answers. Now, they have to listen. Because he said this younger generation has a lot of new answers that I didn't think of. So I can't always be the answer. I have to now learn how to listen. We have to continually learn, and we have to be open to new skills. So let's go to Gen X. Yeah, we're talking to the hand, right, Gen X? How many Gen Xers? Where are my Gen Xers in here? Right, we saw you. Gen X. I think that there's going to be a wing in the Smithsonian. It's coming. And it's going to say, welcome to Gen X then, because you see, there'll never be another. It's the end of a generation that we will never see again. Why? Because Gen X, you had freedom. You had your bike. You had wheels, and you could go anywhere, and nobody even cared where you went. In fact, your mother said, stay out until the what? Till the streetlights come on. And if you came home early, what'd she do? Get back out there. Did anybody ever ask where you went? No, nobody cared. Just don't come home. We're busy. We're busy, right? What an interesting time today. Two moms, probably two Gen Xers, they take their little chairs, they park them in the front, they have a glass of wine, and they tell their kids, you can ride the bike from the stop sign over here. And then they look at each other and they say, hi, aren't they independent? Yeah. It's over. Now we've got Ring, we've got the doorbell where we can see around. When I'm at a conference, I see dads. Oh, look where my kids are. Oh, get away from there. They're watching their kids in the driveway. There is you know what I'm talking about, right? It's over. It's over. Freedom is gone. You were the last generation that could ever have an attitude because you had so much freedom and nobody really cared. And you know what? It was a different time back then. I've got to admit it. That was a time when a baby boomer probably in advertising said, hey, let's put lost kids on the milk carton. Let's scare those 10-year-olds to death to stay home, right? Remember that? So you're eating your Wheaties. Remember your Wheaties? I'm not going there. And there you are. Oh, Mom, the neighbor's missing. And your baby boomer mom said, I'm sorry, we're busy. Let's get going. Come on, we got to get this. Nobody even cared, right? It was an interesting time when Halloween came. Think about this. Gen X got a pillowcase. Today we buy our kids those cute little bags. We gave you a pillowcase. Go out there, but don't eat any of that. Don't eat the fruit for sure. Because the neighbor could have put razor blades and pins in those apples. And what about those milk duds? No. How many of you have kids 10 and under? Imagine telling them, don't eat the milk duds. The neighbor put razor blades and pins in it. They would be in therapy right now. If you think about what a weird time it was the time when we were so afraid you were like smoking a little weed while we were gone, because we were never there. We were either volunteering or working. And so we would put a commercial on TV and it said, it was a frying pan. The frying pan comes out and you're watching TV, remember, this is your brain. And then an egg cracks. This is your brain on drugs, right? Did it work? I'm not even asking. Highly independent. Very, 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 very much about running they say that you ran the households because your mom was working, you were latchkey kids, a lot of you had to come home. And then you did something so interesting. You loved your friends, which is where the TV show Friends came from, all Gen Xers. Take credit for that, Gen X. I think we're on 25 years of Friends, yeah. You loved your friends so much, and you wanted to share part of you. So millennials, this came from Gen X, this idea of getting to know me. What you did was you stole music from the radio. It was a crime. Sony was watching. They wanted to arrest you, but they couldn't. You took music from the radio and you made little tapes with it. You would push a tape recorder up against the radio, hoping that the DJ would shut up when your favorite song. And I don't know why, but you had to press play and record at the same time. Remember? And you made a mixtape. And you would get your favorite songs, and you were so creative that they had themes. When you were in love, they were all love songs. When you broke up, 9 Inch Nails. I don't know where you were. I hear nothing. And you gave your music to your friends, and it was called, if it was me, Karen's Mix. And you gave your mix away. Now think about this. How do we get our music, our files today? It's called sharing. It came from Gen X because Jobs was watching, and Sony was also watching, but Apple got it first. And now everything that we do is about sharing, and I want you to hear this, because we will get the next big idea from the next younger generation. We watch young people, we watch what they do, and this is where the trends come in. And so I love that you're all talking about growth, and you're talking about how you can inspire each other. You've got to begin to learn from younger people, because the answers are there, because the world is changing. And so you made your mixtapes. And I bet if any of you baby boomers go in your garage, you're going to see a whole shoebox full of tapes that your kids left at your house, and now they want them back, right? So it was such an interesting time that will never happen again. Gen X, you are the most independent of all the generations. You are the most opinionated of all the generations, right? You're adaptive and independent. You're determined. You're dedicated. You have wonderful, wonderful qualities. The only thing I tell you to do is that you have to soften. You have to soften because you're in a hurry. And for many of you at work in leadership roles, you are now leading people younger than you, and they're not as sure as you are. You're confident. And they're not as sure as you are, and you're going to have to reassure them, and you're going to have to help them. And I know that Gen X, you always say to people that might, oops, it was me pressing the wrong button. Don't panic. My door is always open. Come in, but don't stay too long. Yeah, and you back again? And don't come too often. So you've got to really remember that now you are working in between the millennials and you're working with baby boomers. And so you have to really learn how to soften and give up your time. You want work-life balance. When you first came on the scene, we made fun of you. That was where we kind of called you slacker. Remember that word? Probably some of you do and some don't. But back then, you wanted work-life balance. Millennials should thank you for bringing it on now. It took 20 years to get to where we are today, thanks to you. You're self-reliant and practical, you're independent and adaptable, questioning and cynical. Now you can laugh about it because that's who you are, right? And you're loyal to people more than you are to organizations. And so Gen X, we need you. We need you to share your ideas, to share your humor, and we need you to continually lead. Because we've got the 30-year-olds. I don't know. What are you? With the 30-year-olds, just stand up. Let's take a peek at who you are. If you're 30 or under, look at them all. Yeah. So what, are you a baby boomer? Excuse me, are you a millennial? You're a millennial. Are you a millennial or are you a Gen X? Yeah, we don't know. Look at your music. Basically, you're in between. When we start to look at generations, the first years of a generation will be very different than the last years, more than ever now because of technology. So these are the people that were born in the 80s, okay? The technology in the 80s is very different than the technology in the 90s. And so when we begin to look at the kids that were, the young people that were born in the 80s, we called you millennials, but you really have the work ethic of a baby boomer, excuse me, of a Gen X, and you have the heart and soul of a millennial. So this is the generation that started to bring on community. And the word community, if you'll notice, it's there more and more and more. The 30-year-old brought on this whole idea of developing community, that work was more than just work. We were going to build communities, we were going to do more things together, and this started with you, Exennials. And now I've got to go on because you do have a lot of the qualities of her, no, the millennial. Now, the reason I like to make fun of this is, think about the music when she went,
You're on the phone with your girlfriend, she's upset, she's going on about something that you said.
what happened to the music? What happened to the band? This is like where it all started with millennials. I like to make fun of millennials. Yeah, okay, be quiet. So millennials, yeah. The music changed, and so did the generation. But the change is real. The millennials are bringing a new mindset to all of us. They're bringing a new mindset and a new skill set and new enthusiasm. And didn't you see the enthusiasm yesterday? I see it here. I see a lot of enthusiasm. The younger people are bringing the enthusiasm and the life back into organizations again, and it's pretty exciting, right? But in the beginning, it wasn't so much fun. And it might still be that way in so many organizations, because sometimes I will go into a group and I'll start talking and they'll say, oh, you're a baby boomer, so you can't stand those millennials, can you? And I say, no, I'm the millennial evangelist. Because they expect me to say you're coddled and that you have a trophy, you want a trophy for everything. That's the old way of thinking. We are trying to leave that behind. Because the reality of it is that this generation does not want to be micromanaged. This generation wants to begin to lead. And what they need is some of the enthusiasm and encouragement from older people to help them do that. So, millennials, best educated of all the generations. It started with the education. Why? Couple reasons. Number one, 2008, when the recession came, there was no work. But also, number two, think about all the online learning. And hey guys, I'll give you all my slides. If you want my slides, if you give me your card, I'll give all of you, I'll give it to you in the PowerPoint program so you can take it back and use it. Because I think there's a lot of information here that you might want to use. Think about online courses. Think about all of the online learning that has started. So now think about what we're going to be going with Gen Z. So we have more information. We are learning in different ways. And this is a generation that loves to learn. They love training. They love development. But it has to be fun. It can't be boring, because if it's boring, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go on their phone, just like half of you do anyway. We go on our phones. Oh, we're getting all of that, right? And now my phone on my wrist keeps going off. I want to go, stop calling me. I'm busy. Once I was speaking and I went like this and it said, the little buzzer went off, you fell. And I did not fall. I'm okay. Whoever I'm talking to in my phone, I have no idea. It's a crazy world, right? Things are changing so much. So here you are, you're optimistic, ambitious, you're open to new ideas, but you have anxiety. And nobody's going to admit it, but we are starting to see now more and more anxiety. I spoke about it yesterday when I talked about Harvard and I talked about kids in school. But today, younger people are afraid. They're afraid that they're not going to get promoted. That's why they are a little more aggressive, because they have a tremendous fear, because we have pushed them all through school. Get the better grades, get the coach, move, push, and all of a sudden they're in the workplace and it's not going as fast as they think that it should go. Many of them have school debt, college debt, and they have a lot of bills to pay, and we're not giving salaries that they expected. So a lot of the expectations that came in the 80s and the 90s and in early 2000, they all went away in 2008, 2009. The world changed. And this is a generation that has felt that change. And so they have fear. So we have to, more and more programs, they're asking us to talk about confidence. Because we have to now instill in them a confidence that, for many of us baby boomers, we had that motivation. But this is a generation whose parents pushed them, but they may not have given them all of the tools for how to succeed when times get tough. So we're back to this right now, and we have a generation that needs our help. But what they've done, and I want you to think about the changes that they've made, because I live in a very conservative city as far as work goes, and almost every company that I talk to says that the younger people, millennials, have changed the culture of work. It's changing. They brought about purpose. They want to know why we are doing it. Websites are all about purpose right now. They want social interaction. We blame young people for always being on their phone, but the reality of it is they are very social. Did you ever notice? You never see a millennial out there, do you? I see 20. They go in herds, like, oh, there's 30 of them over there. Yeah, they're highly social, and they like to be with their friends. Millennials, sometimes you gotta be with other generations, though. You just can't hang out with millennials. They want to learn and grow, so they're bringing training and development back into companies. And they want good training, and they like online courses, okay? They want feedback. Yes, they want feedback. So we have to learn now how to give feedback and how to receive feedback. And they don't want feedback just once a year, they want it continually. So they want you to keep them kind of abreast of how they're doing at work. Even monthly feedback would be better than annual feedback. They want challenging work. They like special projects. They know what work has to be done, but this is a generation that enjoys projects, and they enjoy working on projects with other millennials because it becomes very, very social. They want transparency, and when I say transparency, we use that word a lot. They want to know how they're being evaluated, so that before the evaluation, they've already been given a list of what you're looking for. And so as you talk about EWI, you talk about what your chapters want, talk about where you want to see the chapters go. Paint a picture, because they'll take that on. Hey, I think I can work on that. So talk about where the future is going and how that they can be a part of it. They want career development, and this is a tough one. They are afraid that they are wasting time. And so they want to know that they are in a place where they can have career development. What I love about volunteering in associations is you learn so much. So talk about the opportunities and the growth that you can get by taking on a job, taking on a leadership role, becoming part of a board, or part of the maybe the speaker committee, where you can also learn and grow, because I believe that associations are a great place for people skills or leadership skills, because leadership skills are really what we're looking for. How we manage people is the most successful tool that you can have in the workplace. Am I right? This is an interesting one, even in associations, where you can begin to change some of the things that you've done for 30 years. Do it. Young people are looking for organizations that have flexibility. If they see a rigidness, we've done it this way forever, we're going to continue, they're not going to stay, because they are part of the growth of that new idea. They want engagement, and engagement today comes from trust. And trust is an interesting word. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. When we trust, if I give you a crazy idea, and I've been working with Charlie, I bet you have a million of them. She's the most creative person I have ever worked with. She wants to trust that if she gives an idea, she's not going to be thrown under the bus. That you're going to at least value that idea, because with trust, people take ownership. They have a sense of pride in their organization. When we have trust, we have open communications. We have shared values, which I feel you all have. This room is full of women and men who have shared values, and that's why you can grow so well. And people are fully present. I don't see anybody on their phone. I'm so impressed, because half the time I do see a couple, but you are all eyes up here. When that phone gets in the way, we don't really gain trust, because we feel like there's somebody much more important than me right now. But you guys are amazing. I have to give you credit. It's one of the best groups I've ever talked to. So many times. Okay, who remembers the AA? Who remembers the AA? Anybody remember it? Okay, maybe you're on the cusp here. Because now we've got a whole new generation coming. And the music is changing. Yeah, we've got Gen Z. And Gen Z is on the scene right now. And it's interesting, because this is the generation. I didn't think I would be talking about them. I thought I would be done. But I am actually brought into universities right now, because this is a generation that's confusing at university. So I'm going to briefly go over what's coming. Just briefly go over what's coming. They're not millennials. Okay? They are not millennials at all. They are much more aggressive. Okay? They are much more aggressive. They are about the truth. They are true digital natives. They're online 24/7. They're louder and they're bolder, and they have very firm ideas. And they want their ideas to be heard. So we're going to have to be better listeners with this generation. This generation is so different than almost every person in this room, because they never experienced... Remember when you had to download something? Oh wait, I'm going to go download think I'll go out and mow the yard with me. Remember how like over there going, oh. Today I was on the plane and yesterday I was on the plane and the Wi-Fi went down and I was next to a millennial and she went, this is, and I went, this Wi-Fi sucks. I said, oh, you don't even know it. This is a generation that wants everything 24/7. Did anybody have the news on this morning? So Apple is just opened their new Apple in New York. And now millennials, and I hope that millennials think of me as their cool aunt. Millennials think of Tim as the cool uncle. And Tim Cook has decided that listen to this, that the Apple store in Manhattan will be open 24/7. Now who in the world has something broken at 3 a.m.? I gotta go to the Apple store. Young people. They want everything open 24/7, and at universities this is a problem right now. They want their doctors 24/7, they want their pizza 24/7, they want everything 24/7. This is on the college campuses. The number one problem right now is because they're having to do it, right? So now they have these like little mobile food little robots now delivering the food at night because nobody wants to do that. Okay, less words, more pictures for your website. So young people don't read anymore a lot. They want very few words, and they want pictures of them. So don't put up all your officers. And all. Nobody cares. Nobody's looking at that picture but you and your husband or your wife. We want young people. They don't think we're that cool, and they don't want to go out with you. They will say hi to you. They want you to be cool at work, but they really don't want you to be their friend. They have their own friends. So they want less words and more photos. I know this sounds kind of cruel. This one you can have. It's a lot about family, very close to their families, very worried about money, very worried about college costs, very much about online learning. So looking at everything with a different lens. Is it worth it? Money is the biggest thing in their minds right now because they've heard about all of the college debt that millennials have and they don't want it. So you're getting a generation coming out who's going to be much more practical and they're not crazy about collaboration. After we've worked all these years to collaborate, we have to teach them because they're very much individual learners. Why? Because they've been on their phone all day by themselves and they're very much, so if you think you've got millennials and you've got it down, millennials, you've got a whole other generation to learn about. And as they come in, they're going to want a lot more honesty, okay? They're going to want a lot more get to the point and what's in it for me. So what I want you to do is to look at every person right now as a resource. The thing that has really helped me the most in my career, and I think I'm doing okay on the time, right? Yeah, I was that side, so I'll go through. The thing that has helped me the most, I think, in my career was looking at the mistakes I made as a retailer. Stayed in my own little world. Never really went out, only hung out with the people that worked in the store. Never really got to know anyone really younger and to start to study the trends. And I think that was probably the biggest mistake I made. When I started speaking in 2000, I thought that I would only talk to women's groups because I came from a women's clothing store and I heard your stories for 20 years. I was speaking at the Westin in Houston's Galleria, and a guy named Garrison Wynn came and heard me speak. He came from stand-up comedy, and it was an honor for him to be in the audience. When I was finished, he came up to me and he said, "Could I be your coach? I think you should speak corporate." And I said, "Coach?" And I started thinking about it. If I was to pick a coach, who do you think I would have picked? A woman. I was with women for 20 years. I would have picked a woman because I thought that I would be speaking at women's conferences. And he said, "I'd like to be your coach. You should speak corporate." He took me under his wing and he taught me about how to get into corporate. He taught me how to make my stories right and tight. He told me how to use my humor to get people laughing. And it worked. I have been really a corporate speaker for almost 20 years. And I love women's groups. But pretty much I've been on the corporate track because of Garrison Wynn. In 2008, I had the biggest contract with Sun Microsystems, which is now Oracle, for 2009. I was going to go and brand their 8 sales divisions. It was a year's worth of work. It was pretty cool. Thanksgiving of 2008, I got a phone call from Sun, and they said, "We're canceling. The world's falling apart. The recession has hit." All of my work in 2009 was canceled. So I had nothing to do. But there was this like 23-year-old African-American with their little Afro Puff, that's what she calls it, named Crystal Washington. She lives in Houston, and she was kind of a big deal on the Twitter. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give her a call. And I said, would you teach me social media? And she said, if you teach me how to be a speaker. I said, it's a deal. And we started meeting, and we started creating a program, and we called our company Social Tunities, teaching associations in Houston the opportunities of social media and how to sell. Actually, she talked, and then I translated, because our whole audience was baby boomers. They had no idea what she was talking about. We were a great team. We were a great team. She changed my life. She changed my life, and I changed hers. She is an international speaker. She's a great speaker for you guys to get. She is a wonderful speaker, and she's actually bigger than me. I mean, she's a big-time speaker, and I'm very proud of that. And she's taught me so much about how to make my slides and about social media. You see, we co-mentored each other, and she also moved down the street from me. We are like best friends. Me, a grandma, and now she's 30, a millennial. So what am I telling you this for? I'm telling you this for because you're missing opportunities. You're missing opportunities if you don't grow your net. Because if you hang around with people just like you, you're going to learn what you already know. So I want you to expand, and I want you to grow, and I want you to become a millennial evangelist. Thank you guys for having me.